Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're out at the range with some AKs to talk about why this rifle, which was so wildly popular for many years, has kind of fallen off. People aren't as interested in them anymore. And I'm saying that because I work with a gun shop that has AKs sitting on the wall. And it seems that people have kind of lost interest in them. Why? These things are great rifles. People enjoy shooting them. It's a great cartridges that they're offered in. So why are they falling off? Why are people moving away from AKs? I think I may have some answers for you guys. Maybe we can turn that around. So let's get started with today's video, taking a closer look at the AKs and why they went from extremely popular to not so popular in 2025. A lot of folks ask me, how can I get involved in the firearms business in that particular community? And one of the best ways to do that is to become a gunsmith. Every gunsmith I know is just overbooked with work. It's a very good living. And so if you would like to become a gunsmith, you need to go to a gunsmithing school or become an apprentice for an existing gunsmith. But Modern Gun School is an accredited college that also works with veterans in the GI Bill, where you can go and get a degree from accredited college in gunsmithing and then go out and start your own gunsmithing business, which I think is a really great option. Again, throughout my entire life, gunsmiths have always been able to earn a really good living, assuming they have a really strong work ethic. So please check out Modern Gun School. I do have a link in the video description below. In the late 1980s, I was buying guns. I was just getting out of high school and getting on with my adult life, and AKs were of extreme interest to me. Back in the 80s, the AK was a rifle that a lot of people considered to be communist junk, and they simply didn't want to buy them. And the prices were low, ridiculously low. Now, this is one of the premium AKs from that era. This is a Polytech Legend underfolder. These things command a very high price today. And even back then, they were more expensive than your standard stamped AKM from China, but still they were very affordable rifles. And again, it was mostly because people simply didn't want them. The ammunition was dirt cheap. It was cheaper than 5.56, certainly cheaper than 308. And I'm talking about the 7.62x39. Back then, 5.45 really wasn't a thing in the US market. But so the ammo was dirt cheap, the guns were dirt cheap and readily available. When I say dirt cheap, you could get a stamped AKM, Norinco, for example, for $250. I mean, it was just dirt cheap. And again, they weren't popular, so those prices never really went up. But then as time went on, we go through the 90s, we get into 94, we get into the assault weapons ban, and then we go through 2004, get into the 2000s. The prices of AKs has steadily gone up, and the availability of those rifles has steadily gone down. The Chinese AKs that used to flood the American market for dirt cheap prices, they got shut off because China did something about importing machine guns or something like that, and they used that as justification to deny us, non-criminals, access to firearms. That's the way the US government does things historically. And so they got shut off. And then the ammunition. Somebody made a pistol, presumably chambering 7.62x39, and because of a law that was passed saying you can't have armor-piercing ammunition in handguns, and this was a handgun AK, and the 7.62x39 had a steel core that was coming out of China, well, then we got to shut all that down because it's armor-piercing handgun ammo, and we can't do that. Complete violation of the law. The people that wrote the law even wrote a letter to ATF saying don't do that. That's not the spirit of the law. They didn't care. They did it anyway. All right, so all this is conspired to drive the prices of the ammunition and the guns up. Then you get into Russia rampaging through Europe and starting wars and things like that, and sanctions that have been applied against Russia, the shutting down of all the imported ammunition out of Russia that used to be dirt cheap, and the guns. All that got shut down with sanctions. Again, driving the prices up and bringing the availability down. That primarily is what killed the AK. Well, it's not dead, but what is putting downward pressure on the AK market in the United States. At Copper, we have a whole wall of AKs, and they very rarely sell. Very rarely sell. Go back 6-7 years in time, and AKs were one of the top sellers. And so they were still popular just a decade ago, but they were becoming more and more expensive, and people were complaining about it, right? People were used to the $300 rifles. They aren't so attuned to a $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $2,000 import like Arsenals. People just don't want that anymore. It's just too much money. And then you have the AR-15. Now, this is a pistol. This is from this is a Palmetto State Armory. This is a PSA gun, one of their pistols that has one of their braces on it. These AR-15s, back in the 80s, when I was a kid, they cost more, several $100s more than an AK. Now you get to 2025, and these can be had for less than $300 in some cases, depending on the manufacturer. So ARs are extremely dirt cheap at the same prices that AKs were 30 years ago. That's how cheap these have become in terms of cost. And people would just rather have an AR-15. In my opinion, the AR-15 is a better rifle, but I don't want to get into all that. It's not hugely better. I just prefer the AR over the AK. And so you have the pressure the AR-15 is putting on the AK, right? All these companies making ARs in a race to the bottom to get the prices down, and that's putting downward pressure on the popularity and pricing and stuff like that of the AKs as well. So here we are. And what is the state of the AK market, right? What does the AK market look like? Because we used to have Russian rifles, Chinese rifles, all these rifles coming in from countries that actually produce them and use them in their own militaries. A lot of that's been shut down. So now we're looking at domestic production, guns like this. This is the new 300 Blackout from PSA. But these are really fun firearms, and I've had very good luck with PSA AKs. Now, I will say I've not put 20,000 rounds through one of them yet. I shoot them fairly regularly. We're out here shooting this one today, and I've had no issues with them. But there are people out there that have had problems, especially from the early guns. And there's people out there to this day who will say that the PSAs are not high round count guns. They'll do fine for 1,000 rounds, but you get up into 5,000 rounds or more, and they can have problems. I haven't experienced that, but that's the rumor mill online talking about them. So the US produced guns aren't viewed in the same way that the import rifles are or were, right? And when we take a look at the import market, what do we have left, really? We have Zastava, great rifles, but they're expensive. We have Wasser 10s. They've been coming in for decades. They used to be $300. Not anymore. They got worse furniture on them, worse fitment. They're using B and C quality parts in them anymore, it seems. I have rifles, horrible fitment issues, and some that can't even be zeroed, and they're expensive now. Now those things are going for $600+. So the guns that used to be affordable that still come in aren't affordable, and the quality has slipped on them. Not the Zastavas. Zastavas are outstanding, but their problem in the market is that the price is too high. So if you take a look at some other rifles, so what were some of the other options? Well, you can do kit builds. Now, this is a definitive arms rifle, and so you have military parts in it with a US-made receiver, enough parts to make it illegal in the US market. So it's made from surplus parts. So these are very good rifles built by a really good custom manufacturer. And on top of this, we have, this is some of the SAG or the Sure Shot rail systems. This is the Mark II. We just recently posted a video about that. This is a tricked out rifle. This rifle, because it's a custom definitive arms AK with the Sure Shot rail system on it, Veltor stock and all that stuff, this is over a $3,500 rifle. Nobody wants to pay $3,500 for an AK. Very few people, the hardest of the hardcore. But the hardest of the hardcore guys, kind of like me, and we prefer the classic look. We don't even want all the doodads on it. But if you want a modern defensive rifle or a modern fighting rifle, you kind of need the doodads, because this is where you mount all your force multipliers, lights and optics and things like that. The other downside to the AK is when you do this to it, it really increases the weight of the firearm. So this rifle configured with M-LOK rails and all that stuff is going to weigh more than an AR-15 that's configured with similar capabilities, just in my experience. Now, I'm sure somebody's going to out there and say, well, there's this titanium rail for $6,000 you can put on. Sure. But generally speaking, the AKs get to be a little chunky when you start doing things to them like this. This is one of the PSA AKs. This one's in 5.56, and this one has the Sure Shot M4 buffer tube on it. This is a brace. This is a pistol. And then, of course, it has a suppressor on it. 5.56. Let's talk about that. We're talking about the ammunition, right? The 5.45 and 7.62 by 39. The cost has gone up and the availability has come down, mostly because of sanctions. Most of the cheap ammunition we got came out of Russia. We used to get cheap ammo out of China, but I told you what happened there. They shut that all down because most of that Norinco ammo, which I still have some, had steel cores in it, and they banned it as armor-piercing handgun ammo. So what's happening on the U.S. market now? Well, you're seeing companies like AAC spin up production of 7.62 by 39, and they say 5.45 in the future. But the cost of this domestically produced ammunition, including ammo that we use here at the channel, federal 7.62 by 39, there is domestic production of the by 39 of the communist block cartridges, but the cost of this is substantially more than the old import ammo. So when you combine the cost of ammunition, the limited availability ammunition, the limited availability of quality import firearms, and the view that maybe the American produced stuff isn't up to par, all this stuff is pushing the AK down in popularity. So what can we do? Well, I think, you know, gosh, there's another thing I want to bring up just real quickly. KUSA, right? We all had great hopes for that. The early guns, I have some of them, were amazing, absolutely amazing. But things just went sideways and the company failed spectacularly. The quality went down, people say. I didn't experience that, but I haven't picked up any of their firearms in a while. And they just fell apart, further lending credence to the notion by some that American-produced AKs just aren't as good as the import rifles, right? And as I said, I've not had any problems with PSAs. I think they've done really good for me, but there's people out there saying that they're not as good as their imported counterparts. So yeah, what do? Well, I think one of the things we can do to rectify the ammo is do something like what we see here and start going to 5.56. 5.56 223 is very popular on the US market, and we still have very affordable ammunition that's out there. You have rifles like this that is chambered in 300 blackout. The ammunition is not necessarily affordable. The price is coming down, but it's an American cartridge that's popular here in the United States and readily available. So maybe part of the solution is to start looking at domestically produced rifles that use ammunition that is more common in Western countries like 5.56, 300 blackout, 308, things like that. So let's do some shooting with the rifles, and then I'll give you some final thoughts. What do I think the future of the AK market holds? How do we go forward with the AK? Do we still go forward? And we'll talk about that as we wind up the video. So how do we move forward with the AK? Well, I think the path forward, at least for right now, the way things are shaping up globally, is probably for the American market to produce its own firearms and just continue evolving those products. Things like what PSA is doing, what KUSA was trying to do, what Century Arms is trying to do. Maybe that's the future of AKs in the US market. I would love to see the sanctions lifted at some point and resume the importation of all these different firearms and additional firearms we never had access to. That would be cool. But, you know, I've been on this rock way too long to get too optimistic about that, but we're going to keep fighting for it. So one of the things I always see come up in the comments is like, well, I think that the gun manufacturers like PSA or whoever are screwing over the consumer. They're just jacking the prices up because they can. Well, no. PSA is like really focused on keeping prices low. When they're coming up with a new firearm, they're taking all sorts of things into consideration, including the cost. So they're purposely trying to find ways to keep the cost low, but still keep the quality there where it's acceptable. And that's a tough, balance to strike, but that's what they're trying to do. So no, they're not just out there just jacking the prices up like, well, we got 20 bucks in it, we can sell it for 2,000. That's not what's happening. So why are the AKs so expensive then, right? Why were they $300 back in the day, and today they're $1,000 or more for a firearm like this? Well, it is, believe it or not, it is far cheaper to produce this firearm than it is an AK. And why is that? Well, these use old world technology that was made popular during World War II, stampings and things like that. Modern manufacturing, it's much easier to CNC print something, basically. You just put a block of aluminum in there and hit go, and it spits out a finished product. This takes a lot of effort, a lot of specialized tooling and skills by laborers to hand fit and get these things put together, tested, and out the door, and no two AKs are alike, mostly because of how they are constructed, out of stampings and things like that. So it actually costs more to do this type of manufacturing. And the AKs that used to cost $300 were made in countries that have no labor laws. They basically have cheap labor through the, just insane amounts of cheap labor that they could produce those things dirt cheap, import them, pay a tax and everything else, and tariffs and everything else they had to pay to get them in the country, and still sell them for $300. That's not American manufacturing, folks. Americans require a working wage, and that just keeps going up and up and up with inflation, especially the last decade or so. So the AK, how do we move forward? I think, again, we start focusing on the American products and we try to find innovative ways to bring the cost down. We can do that. Economy of scale is one way to do that. Different manufacturing techniques would be another way, potentially using more use of polymers, more use of machining and things like that, like Sharp Brothers receivers and stuff. There's all sorts of things we can do. The ammunition, we're starting to see the production of ammunition here in the US, but there's other countries out there we could import ammunition from, and we need to be proactive in doing that. Now we have a friendly administration, presumably. We can get a Form 6s, which are import forms, approved and start bringing in ammo and guns from other countries, potentially, as things start to change politically in the United States. We got to call our representatives and keep that ball moving forward. So those are some of the things I think that we can do. Do I think the AK is still a viable firearm in 2025? Absolutely. Absolutely. They're great firearms. They're more accurate than people give them credit for. Generally speaking, they're very good quality, depending on who you buy it from, of course, who made it. But they're good rifles, and they're certainly competitive. And so I'd like to see companies like Sure Shot continue to produce accessories like this that brings the AK up into the modern world. Now, AKs will never be as customizable as ARs, with the flat top ARs and stuff like that out there. There's just so much support for them that that's the way the American market tends to lean. But we can certainly do the same things with the AK. So let us know in the comments down below, what are your thoughts on the AK? Do you still see it as popular as it was 20 years ago? Or do you see it as failing? And why do you think it might be dropping off in popularity? Let us know in the comments down below, and also let us know how you think we can improve the overall outlook of the AK on the US market. All right, if you guys like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel, the best way to do that is to become part of our Patreon family. There is a link in the video description below. Also, right here on YouTube, you got the thanks and subscribe button underneath the video player you're watching right now. Hit either one of those buttons. You can support us right here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. Please swing by, check out Copper Custom. Thank you for 17 years of support. We'll talk to you guys soon.